Demand at food banks has surged during this pandemic. That fact highlights the ongoing needs of people on the economic margins. It also flags how close many other people are to those margins if just one paycheck doesn't come in as expected. Nick Saul is president and CEO of Community Food Centres Canada, and he joins us now in the provincial capital for more on food security. Nick, it's good to see you again. How are you managing during this pandemic?
I'm managing okay. It's stressful, but I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Not at all. It's good to talk to you. I just want to share some facts that you laid out at a recent Walrus Talks with our viewers and listeners on podcast as well. You pointed out during that talk that in Canada alone, 4 million people, 4 million, are food insecure. That's 13% of our population. If you look in the Black communities, the number soars to 29%. And in the territory of Nunavut, 47%, nearly half the people in Nunavut, worry about where their next meal will come from. Now, I think you gave that talk in quote unquote normal times. These are not normal times. So, what do you think the pandemic has done to those numbers?
Well, I'll start by saying that the number is now 4.5 million people based on the latest statistics. And I think for people who are perhaps hearing those numbers for the first time, I don't know how they're receiving it, but I hope they're deeply disturbed by the depth of inequality in our society that would show that over 4.5 million of our fellow citizens, 1 in 8 people, 1 in 6 kids, are struggling to put food on their table. And I think we can get a bit lost in the numbers. That translates into people, anxiety and stress, poor health, diminished and shortened lives, loneliness, all sorts of mental health issues. So there is a deep divide in our society. And we certainly came into COVID as an unequal society. And I think it's important to remember that. We are signatories to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which makes it legally binding for us to deliver on the right to food. And we are a long way from doing that. And COVID has exacerbated and magnified the kind of inequalities and inequities we as a society were facing coming in. So we have a lot of stress, increased stress, of course. If you look at the Stats Canada numbers from last week, 1 million people lost their jobs, another 2 million people were on reduced hours. And these are some of our most vulnerable workers, women, young people, temporary jobs, part-time, non-unionized. We have built an economy on precarity and precarious employment, and they were the first to get wiped out, and they are now turning to emergency supports like never before.
Well, let's talk about those emergency supports. Some people may be asking themselves, could we possibly create enough food banks to solve the food insecurity problem? What's the answer to that?
Impossible. No amount of food is going to solve the kind of economic crisis, the inequalities that exist in our society. Food will not solve hunger. I have said that for many, many, many years. I mean, it's appropriate in an emergency time like a fire or flood or COVID-19 to create as much support as we can, and people are turning to emergency services, but no one who works in a food bank would say that it's the answer to hunger. Hunger is rooted in poverty, and poverty is about people not having enough income to make the choices that they need to make for themselves and their families. So it's really important, I think, at this time when we're looking at increased emergency support, we're also looking at some of the economic measures that the government is putting forward. So the Canada Emergency Response Benefit is really important. We were really glad to see the GST credit get increased for people. The child benefit saw an increase about $300 per kid. I think just recently we've seen increased support to low-wage workers. So I think the combination of, yes, we need to deal with an emergency and food might be the answer in the very short term. But I am a bit concerned about institutionalizing this notion of charity. We need to be focusing on public policy, and we're going to do that by supporting people to have enough income to make the choices that they need to make.
It's interesting. There have been a lot of people who have championed a so-called universal basic income. for a long time. I think of former Senator Hugh Segal, who helped bring it in the province of Ontario fully 45 years ago for seniors. The program was called the Guaranteed Annual Income Gains. And yet here we are, the CERB, the Emergency Response Benefit, pretty much is a guaranteed annual income, isn't it? I mean, it's not annual, it's on a short-term basis, but the gist of it is there. Do you think that this may be the launching point for a really deep national conversation about this, where it actually happens?
Well, I think it gives clues to a future architecture of our social infrastructure. There's no question we need to have more courage now more than ever before to say that people cannot fall below a certain threshold. And CERB is an example of $2,000 a month. And I think there would be debates about whether it's more or less. It certainly should be more in my perspective. So I think that we are at a moment when we can start to say that we have built an economy that is based on vulnerability. And it's not just a responsibility of the state. I mean, the state, through a social wage, such as healthcare or such as a basic income, has a very important role to play. But also our markets and our economy. We should not allow businesses to be, quote, sustainable if they're not paying their workers fairly. So I'm excited to have a very robust conversation about the kind of economic system we're going to have in place going forward. And of course, the state has a very large role to play in terms of legislative framework and regulatory framework. I mean, it wasn't so long ago we were squabbling over whether it should be a $14 minimum wage or a $15 minimum wage, when we know full well that a living wage in Toronto is $22. And we were squibbling about 2 days of two sick days or 3 sick days. And it's just ridiculous. We have workers who we are now, I think, gaining some empathy for, who are on the very front lines of this crisis, who are exploited and very marginally employed. So whether it's a basic income or a social infrastructure through a workers' benefit or a national pharmacare program, or increasing the child benefit, or making sure that we're making investments in childcare to reduce the costs of the burden of childcare. There's a whole assortment of conversations we need to be having going forward that are squarely in the domain of public policy, and also trying to get our economy to actually create jobs that don't make people vulnerable every time they go home from work. People should not be working full time and wondering whether they can put food on the table. It's just insane to me.
Speaking of public policy, I do need to ask you about this, which I suspect many of our viewers saw the headlines of not too long ago. You know, there are farmers tossing excess milk. There are farmers who are plowing fruits and vegetables back into their fields. At a time of such food insecurity, I'm sure people are wondering, how is it possible we can actually be throwing away perfectly good food instead of getting that somehow, in spite of supply management, getting that somehow to people who need it? What's the answer there?
Well, I think it's a slippery slope when you start to look at food that's mislabeled or might be getting thrown out, to see it as making its way into trying to, quote, solve the issues of food insecurity in our society. I mean, I think we need to work upstream to make sure that that waste is not happening. But to conflate waste as an answer to the deep inequalities and the deep levels of poverty in our society is, I think, a dead-end game. And so I'm always trying to have the conversation about better wages, more affordable housing, childcare that people can pay for without just ripping apart their budget. These are the things that we need to be focused on. And I think the charitable side of things, translating food that may go to waste into supporting people, is not a very productive conversation. It creates a bit of a moral release valve for us all to say, oh, the problem is being solved. When you actually look at the straight facts, is that since the rise of the charitable food sector in the 70s and 80s and the erosion of our basic rights around food access, food insecurity has only gone in one direction, and it's up. So the answer is if you frame the issue of hunger as hunger, you get a food solution and you get charity. If you frame the issue of hunger as poverty, which is actually where it sits, you get policy and you get a more human rights based focus on how you solve the problem. So the framing is very, very important. One sends you off in a dead end. The other gets you to a place where we can start to build a more equitable society for us all, which that is when we're at our best, when we are connected. And before the crisis around COVID, social distancing was actually inequality. And so if we can reduce social distancing, not only does it mean we'll be at our best because we are social beings that need each other to thrive and survive, but it will also help inoculate us against future shocks that are coming.
We do see when people go to the supermarkets right now that people, when they do their own shopping, maybe buy a little bit extra. Many people do, and they put it in a big box near the exit to go to food banks. Um, but I can't help but wonder when I see the run on toilet paper that we saw earlier, that if we start to see some scarcity on our shelves as it relates to food, the darker side of human nature may kick in, and we may see some things that we're not going to like very much. Now, you're kind of in the human nature business in as much as you depend on people's generosity to help feed others. What concerns do you have in the midst of this pandemic about food security that goes beyond your traditional clientele?
Well, the supply chain has mostly held. So when I see people doing these panic shops of hoarding, I get very worried about our collective sense of citizenship. And we should be really clear that in this COVID moment, people are very disproportionately affected by it. So there are lots of people who can retire to a 3-bedroom home with ensuite bathroom and actually self-isolate, while there are families that are 5 or 6 people in a 1-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom. Or, for example, people who are precariously employed do not have an employer that is going to be so thoughtful about extra sick days or figuring out a flexible arrangement for them. And certainly when it comes to shopping, there is no way the 4.5 million citizens in Canada that are facing food insecurity are going to be able to buy any extra food. It's a struggle just to get any food. So, I mean, I think this takes us to a broader conversation as a society. Are we going to be a society that is about hoarding, or is it going to be about sharing? And I think as we go through COVID, and we will emerge from this, we need to be having conversations that foreground people and the planet, and not profit, greed, and the commodification of everything in life. And as I said before, we are better when we do stick together, but we certainly didn't come into COVID sticking together. And that's a fact. And we're seeing that play out in real time right now, given the vulnerability of so many of our fellow citizens and neighbors. But there will be a day when we have to come to terms with the fact and ask the question. And there certainly will be politicians, because politics is a contact sport, who are saying, let's retrench. We will certainly be on the side at Community Food Centres Canada, joined with others, saying, no, we need to support and prioritize people and create an economy and a state structure that supports us all to thrive.
Human nature being what it is, though, we feel, this may be my impression, it may be wrong, you tell me, but in Canada, we seem to be reasonably pretty good relative to many other places in the world, and I look south immediately, of course, when it comes to sort of taking care of each other. But then when things get a little squirrely, and that's the word the Premier used the other day, well, you know the expression, the animals look at each other a little differently when the well runs dry. Are you worried?
I'm not. I mean, I think when you create an unequal society, you get people pointing fingers at each other. I've long lived through a time when people are absolutely blamed for their poverty, as though it's a character flaw or poor budgeting. These are things that are just simply not true. People are trying to get ahead. They're trying to find jobs that allow them, not 6 jobs, but 1 job that allows them to put good food on the table. So I think it is important to think about how you do build a society where there is less social distancing. And when there's less social distancing, there will be less finger pointing. Now, we're working through this right now, and I think by and large, our structures have generally held. But I want to be really clear that we came into COVID as a very unequal society, and that's just the fact. I mean, we have 11 or 12% of people who live in poverty in this country, 14% who are food insecure. So these are large swaths of our population that live and breathe vulnerability all the time. We were about to come out with a report called Beyond Hunger that we were going to release in Ottawa in May. And we were not looking just at the serious material deprivation that people face, but what that meant socially. So we were talking to people who were saying, I can't have people over to eat because I have no food in my fridge. I've had to take my kid out of dance class because I can't feed her the proper energy she needs to continue in those courses. I cannot send my kid to a birthday party because I can't afford a present. This is the stark reality of millions of our fellow neighbors. And COVID has magnified that, and I hope created a door to say, we can't go back. We have to have a new conversation going forward. And it needs to be about social solidarity. Now, again, there will be others who will be saying different things, but I am telling you, we need to rally those voices to say, we want to build a new society based on equity and connection, because that's how we thrive as a species. We are social beings. We need each other. And in times of crisis, that generosity and compassion and sense of connectedness comes out. How do we then galvanize that into a political project that says we're in it together and that we should take care of each other? And it's not just about personal responsibility. And if you fall by the wayside, it's your fault. I'm afraid, I hope we can boot that conversation to the side, but we shall see. It's an open conversation.
Those three words actually sum up just about every interview we do here, which is we shall see. Nick, Saul, it's always good of you to join us on TVO. Thanks for taking our calls and coming on our airwaves and sharing your views with us.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.